Hello, everybody. My name is Tania Norris, and I'll be your host today on Consciousness Rising Zimbabwe and Beyond. And just to remind people what this channel is all about. If you are interested in anything alternative or holistic or quirky or woo-woo or even scientific, then this is the place where you would want to come and find out who's in Zimbabwe, what are we all doing, because we have a huge, fascinating community here. So please, if you're not into it, you will know somebody who is. So please share this video, like it, give us your comments. You know, I've noticed people haven't been commenting, but it's important that you become part of the conversation, because it's not just about my ideas or the guests' ideas. It's just about everyone's ideas, and you can disagree with us and, you know, put in your tuppence worth, and that's how we all become connected, and that's how we all start a conversation. So welcome everybody, and today we've got a very fascinating, unique character, and his name is Ngoni Murove, and I will be calling him Taps, because that's just kind of his nickname. And Taps has been around in Zimbabwe, originally a software developer, but turned healer and conscious, I would say more of a consciousness type of teacher and healing. And we are going to be having a fascinating conversation about interdimensionality, time travel, parallel worlds, because all of that ties into the work that Taps is doing. Welcome, Taps.
Thank you so much, Tanya.
We've been trying to get this together for a while.
Yeah, we have. I'm excited about it.
So Taps, you and I have had a couple of conversations about, you know, all the things that we love, you know, about the universe, consciousness, the expansion of the universe and consciousness, time travel. So just tell us a little bit about how you arrived at all these fantastic ideas that you have.
Well, I think I've always been a curious person, even as a child. I've always wanted to understand things on a deeper level. I think in my early 20s is when I really started diving deeply into it and trying to understand the principles behind everything. And it started with the thought experiment that I did, where I was trying to imagine basically the beginning of all things. Normally with science, what we do is we start with where we are, and then we break things down, and we keep discovering things at, you know, layer by layer by layer by layer. But I thought, okay, what would happen if I flip that around and I start from the bottom? I start from nothing, right? And then I try and build up until I start to see something that relates to our experience. So that was the process. I mean, this is an experiment that's still running, actually. I mean, it's been running so for years and years, over a decade now. But each time I ask myself these questions about how do things work, slowly understanding starts to seep in. So there's certain things that I started to understand that correlated, for instance, with certain scientific perspectives. But because I'd started from the bottom going up, my view and perspective of them were different, let's say, from the scientific perspective. For me, it made sense why two things can be in the same place at the same time. Whereas if you're going down, it's like, that doesn't make sense.
Okay, and then where we come into parallel worlds, because this is quite a big part of your work, where did we now arrive at that? What are your thoughts and feelings about that?
So it was a few years ago when I was thinking particularly now about time and how time works. And I started getting a deeper understanding of the perspective that time is perceptual. It is purely perceptual. It is how we as individuals perceive our reality, but reality is not itself time-based, right? Time is just it's a property of reality. Like something can have a specific color, something can have a particular time, but in the same way that you can change color or see different colors at the same time, you can do the same thing with time. So if you kind of shift and you just start looking at time as a property of reality, and then you step back in the same way that you can navigate through space, you can also start to navigate through time. And it is difficult to understand because our whole experience, at least at this point, is beginning and end, right? Time, something starts and then something ends. So stepping out of that can be really difficult, like mental exercise to do it. But for me, when I started just looking at time as purely information, it's just information, right? In that sense, when you look at it as just information, it can be sent from one place to another. You can have then timelines that are all existing simultaneously because it's just information. You can shift from one timeline to another. It's just information, right? In the same way that you can like edit information on a Word document. You can do the same thing with time, right? Once you start getting that appreciation of this is just information that I can work with on a deeper layer.
Mm. But I think it's also maybe difficult for us because we do like to, we tend to think of things in the physicality in this like third dimensional solid thing. And so I think, you know, this concept of everything all exists at the same time, which means that it's all happening together. You know, what was going on in medieval times is actually happening right now in all in the same space. So if I wanted to time travel back to the 14th century, I could do that. Essentially, I've just got to basically step into it because it's right there. It's already happening. So it's also, and this is another idea that we don't remember things. We're literally experiencing them because they all happening at the same time. And so these kind of concepts are very difficult because we tend to think of life in that physical realm. So when you talk about timelines, okay, all these timelines are happening all at once. Do you sense them in a physical, that they're actually physical real, or they just in living in a world of possibilities or potentiality?
And so I think the first thing is to kind of step back and to look at reality from a different perspective. When we look at reality as a material, three-dimensional thing, primarily, it's really difficult to step out of it. But if you look at it purely as information, just as information, right? And space, in terms of where something is in space, is just information. Where something is in time is just information. So what we're doing with, we say everything is happening at the same time, but what we're actually talking about is stepping outside of time. Because if you're trying to, you know, say it's happening at the same time, it's still within time. The idea is time just becomes information that you can kind of step back and start looking at, right? So in one way that I try to kind of explain it is, so using something that we're already familiar with. So we're familiar with space, right? We're familiar with the idea of moving around in space. If I'm here right now, I'm in Harare, I want to go to Bulawayo, right? I can travel through space to get to Bulawayo. I can also travel through space to get to Mutare or Kariba, or wherever else I want to go in Zimbabwe. It's a decision that I make, and I can move through space, right? Now, in this sense, the time dimension, right, is kind of constant, and the space dimension is the one that we're moving through, right? What I'll be challenging you to do is to kind of flip it, make the space dimension constant and make the time dimension the one that you're moving through, right? So when you look at it from this perspective now, let's say Bulawayo, Mutare, Kariba, these become events in time, right? And or outcomes. And so in the same way that you could move through to certain places in space, you can now start doing the same thing in time. So time isn't a stream that goes from one place to another like what we normally imagine it to be. It's actually a fabric. It's like a network, a complex link, a web of different events that are all linking to one another. Now we can experience them in a particular order, and that then becomes our linear time. But that doesn't mean that they exist in that order, right? They're kind of spread out in this web or this fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So the shift in perspective now is to kind of try to imagine yourself stepping out. Let's say you're in a particular place in time right now, then just imagine yourself kind of rising up and then looking up at all the events that have happened, right, in your life, in other lives, but see it now as a web, not as a stream, right? And in the same sense, now, when you look at it as a web, there are different events that could have led to this particular outcome. Perhaps I did something yesterday that led to me being here today, but potentially an alternate, right, timeline, something else could have happened yesterday, but also leads to me being here, right? 10 other things could have happened, but lead to the same outcome. Now it becomes a web, right? And so the idea now is we can start to navigate this web because our time isn't set in like this linear fashion, right? You can kind of spread it out and be like, okay, I can go here. And you can even change to some extent the information about the past, right? Because this is, again, just information. So you have the ability to start shifting things, you know, that led to this eventuality and releasing yourself to open up more kind of potentials, more options for you to move into in the future as well.
Okay, now what you have done and developed is some kind of models or tools whereby people can use these ideas. You know, back in the day, well, for many years, we had that is it quantum jumping or quantum leaping? I don't know what it was called, with Bert Goldman. Yeah. You know, and I mean, I'm really going back, gosh, maybe 10, 15 years, that guy's I don't even know if he's still alive. But it was quite a fascinating thing where you could then leap into an alternative reality or a different timeline where the better version of yourself, let's just say you want to access being a fantastic chef, to an alternative reality where that you, the chef, exists, and gain all the qualities and get all the feedback from that version of yourself and bring it back into this reality. Okay, all right. And how were they doing that? They do that through creative visualization, using your imagination, all of those kind of things, all right? So, and I think it's pretty useful because, you know, even in, like, I'm an NLP practitioner, and we use a lot of creative visualization in NLP. And to me, it's the same thing. You are formulating in your mind the person that you want to be, the you that you are becoming now, or the one that you're reinventing. And is that maybe a way of tapping into an alternative you, because that alternative you maybe already exists?
Yep.
Okay, so that's what I have to say. Now you tell me, how do you incorporate that? Is it similar or is it very different?
So yeah, it definitely is similar. And I think there are a lot of ways, whether it's manifestation, quantum jumping, there's a lot of different names that people use for this idea of moving through time. But it's based on the same principles, right? And so that's, I think, why we see so many of the same threads. Now, from my understanding, all the information, so all potentials exist as information, right? So everything that could possibly have ever happened or could ever happen or is possibly happening exists as information. It all exists from an information point of view, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it exists as in a material reality, right? So there's this kind of greater set of all potentials. Then within that, there's a set of the things that are brought into material reality. And material reality are basically done so through conscious awareness, conscious decision, kind of paying attention to a particular desired outcome, right? So when we pay attention to something, we're pouring energy into this information, and then it has the ability to come into material experience, right? So from that perspective, anything at all that you can possibly think of exists in a potential state. The information is there, right? And what we want to do is then access that information to bring that information into our energetic field right now, so that that information can start expressing itself outward, so that it can then manifest as an actual material experience, right? So that's the idea there. When you're doing the visualization and you're imagining yourself as a particular or in a particular place, as a particular person, what you're doing is you are connecting to that information, right? It's kind of like, remember back in the days we used to dial in with dial-in internet, right? And there's that kind of tone that goes in. That's kind of what you're doing, right? You're dialing in, right, to that information set, to information space. And then there's now a process of, once you've dialed into that information space, to bring that information into your field, right? And then what basically happens then is there's information that is currently that you have that's keeping you where you are. And then there's this new information set, right, which is different. And when you try and merge those, the idea is there's certain things right now that they won't match, right? So certain things that are keeping you where you are will not match where you want to go. And so there has to be a process then of releasing or matching that information set, or that frequency, if you will, because the information is stored in vibrational tones and frequency, right? Matching that frequency so that you shift into the reality, or into the reality that you actually want to experience as a material reality.
Now, okay, that makes perfect sense. Do you then, in trying to match the frequencies, okay, and I've noticed that as well, you know, people want these things, they might be not unrealistic, but the frequency is not a match. You know, if you want something, you have to be it. If you're not it, then you have to pretend to be it. You've got to up your game to be able to attract anything on the frequency, on a very different, or say higher frequency or different frequency. Yeah. And then, so it's getting them there. It's not an instant thing, you know, it's something that has to be worked on. So do you have methods where you help people to get to become a frequency, or a vibrational match is what I call it, a vibrational match to the outcome that they want?
Yeah, so actually in the process that I go through in teaching faith work, right, which is the name that I've given to this particular practice, I only teach the practice right at the end, right? Right at the beginning, we go through the understanding, and then through that process, we then explain how to move from place to place, because it can be, okay, so what happens, there's this new frequency that you want to move into and your current frequency, and you're trying to match them together, right? You're trying to move from one place to another. But there are certain frequencies in your life that are keeping you where you are, right? You are where you are because of a certain number of reasons, and this is literally information that you're keeping within your field, right? They're like anchors. Some people refer to them as anchors. They're keeping you within this time space right now. Now, if you want to shift to a different time space, you need to release the anchors. If it's intention to move to a different one, and the way faith work functions is it's somewhat different from state, because faith work kind of works with a pulling effect, right? You're being pulled into this new reality that you want to move into. Now, once that pulling starts, right, all the anchors that are keeping you where you are will just start to come up. It's kind of like the idea of, if I'm sitting on this chair, right, and I've been on this chair for years, right, it's a really comfortable chair. If I make a decision to move and start going outside of the room, and then all of a sudden I realize that there are these ropes that are tying me to the chair, right? The more I fight and try to get out of the room, if the ropes are still there, it will just become more and more painful, right? You need to let go of the ropes. You need to cut them. So there's a process that we then go to. There are a couple of declarations that you say in terms of resignation from dramas, releasing attachments to certain people that aren't serving you, kind of situations. So you go through these declarations, but the key of it is it has to work itself out in everyday life, right? So you will experience that person who's keeping you where you are, like you will start having these with them. They'll come to the surface. You need to release those, right? There will be certain dramas that happen that come to the surface. You need to release those. There'll be certain emotions that come to the surface. If it's anger that's keeping you where you are, you'll find that all of a sudden you're starting to become more angry. Because you're starting to realize that there's that rope, right? That's keeping me tight to the chair. And you have to go through the process of and setting that up. This is just a rope, right? I can release it, right, in order to move forward. It's not what I am. I can just let it go and move from one place to another. And there's certain somatic practices that you can also do for that. So feeling into the body, actually finding where the vibrational frequency is in the body, kind of observing it and repatterning it, right? So that that anchor then starts being released, and different things. People have different methods that they can use, but essentially that process has to happen in order for you to move from one place to another. So it's not magic, right? There is an actual process that does need to be followed.
Okay. So just to explain to people that fate work, it's fate as in F-A-T-E, as in your fate or your destiny, is the fate work is what TAPS has created, and a whole program of how to get there, you know, in the process of releasing and reinventing, you know, that's the language that I would use, TAPS. Yeah, to get to the next level. Yeah, so, and I have actually done a fate work class, course, and it was really fantastic. And so I really we'll put all of your links and things and information below, so, you know, people interested in coming to see you, you know, they can do that. But I wanted to say something.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've always said it's Mark Twain, but it wasn't Mark Twain. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. Yeah. And this is what I'm hearing you saying now, you know, as we're having this conversation, you know, how you go, but it's a preparation and it's a process. But it's also fun. Yeah. I mean, you know, that is one thing that I know when people think, oh, Lord, you know, now I've got to go and feel those emotions and oh, glory. And that's why a lot of people don't do this kind of work, you know, but they don't realize, no, that is like those are only moments. They're just moments, because most of the moments are fun and creative and joyful. I mean, it's joyful if you have a project and that project is yourself and you're now going to go and create a new version of yourself. There's nothing more exciting than that, I don't think.
Yeah. And the idea as well is we are currently creating our reality. So as it goes right now, you're creating it. Whether you're consciously doing it or not, it's actually happening. The thing that's going to happen today, tomorrow, and all of that, we're actually creating it. Right. So for me, I mean, it's like being in a car where you're not at the steering wheel. It's like, who's driving it? Like, you don't know where you're going. You may as well take the driver's seat, right? And actually start making decisions in terms of where it's going to go. So that's the idea. It is happening already. So at least all we can do now is like, okay, well, maybe let me take some kind of conscious control of it and start then deciding how it's going to go. And it's mainly those things then that are below the surface, right? That are directing us, right? And that's where we kind of start getting into it, because we can make a decision on a conscious level, but the conscious mind is like just the surface of who we are, right? There's all this stuff now underneath in the subconscious mind or the deeper mind, right? And that's the stuff that actually determines how we travel through time, like how we experience our reality. So I think to be able to move into a life of greater joy, peace, and freedom, and that's, for me, that's the core, right? That's what I want: joy, peace, and freedom. Like that's kind of the how I navigate, right, through realities. To be able to move to that, I have to do that consciously and decide, okay, I want to move through all of these things, and it could be difficult, there could be challenges along the way, but it's worth it if at the end of the day your life somehow like improves and you do experience that greater sense of of joy.
But also I think it's important to point out to listeners is that, it all sounds very sort of wooish and very philosophical, but one thing to understand is that scientists, I mean, we've been looking at this. This goes right back to, you know, our earliest teachers. You know, if we want to think about, so let me just turn this off. If we want to think about Aristotle, you know, I mean, that was like 400 years BCE. You know what I mean? These topics have been contemplated for thousands of years. And even now our scientists are, you know, NASA's got a program. Did you know that looks into alternative realities? Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, they do. Every university and has got some kind of a, wouldn't say a category for investigating these alternative realities, because on some level, scientists know that these things, as a scientist, has to be possible. Okay. And if it has to be possible, it very well could be possible. Yeah, CERN, you know what goes on with the Hadron Collider. They're always bragging how they're going to discover alternative realities. If you ever, I keep my eyes on CERN a lot, because I think it's one of the most terrifying things that we're doing. So I keep my eyes on it. They're always bragging about how they're now going to find, they haven't, well, not that they're telling us. So, you know what I'm saying? This is very much a scientific topic, for sure. But when we put it to the test and we get our own evidence of how all of this stuff works, that's what makes it exciting. You know, I don't need a scientist to come and tell me when I've already experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things as well, for me, that's important to realize is we are time travelers by nature, right? That's actually what we do. That's what you're doing every single time you make a decision, every time you set an intention, every time you take in a certain information. If you're going to a particular class, you're reading a certain book, you're traveling through time, you're actually bringing in certain information, which is going to open up new possibilities. And so this isn't something that has to be like, you know, up in the air kind of, you know, theories and all this. You are doing it every single day as you go through your day, as you go through time. The trick now is just like, hey, learn to do it better, right? Because it's already happening. And it's fascinating how, for me, time is the one thing that you are going to travel through time whether you want to or not, right? The idea of you, let's say, going to Bulawayo, we're talking about space, right? No, the question of whether you're going to get to Bulawayo at some point in the future, that's questionable. We don't know, right? We don't know. You could kind of choose to get there, but with time, you are moving through it, right? You're going to get to tomorrow. You're going to get to the next hour. You are actually navigating through it day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. You are automatically flowing through it. So this is just a process of like stopping, like, okay, well, how do I then just exercise a little bit more conscious control over it? And it doesn't have to be these big things. Even something as simple, you could start with something as simple as just when you wake up in the morning, visualize your day, right? That's it. Just say, okay, this is how I see my day going, right? As you're doing that, you're actually then connecting to a certain information field, and then you're bringing it in. So it doesn't have to be a big practice. They're really small things that we can just start doing to actually give ourselves more conscious control of the flow of time in our lives.
That's right. But you talk about that going forward in time, this idea also about going back in time. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever done any inner child work. You go and do the inner child work and you go back to when you were 4 years old or 3 years old, just in your mind. I tell you, the most profound changes in my life is when I've done that kind of work, going back in time.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think absolutely this traveling through time and back in time. I also sometimes think that a lot of our scientists get these downloads. I think that they like drawing out, I don't know, I believe in time travelers. Like I somehow feel like Elon Musk is a time traveler. You know, I love my sci-fi. I mean, I'm quite practical, but I love my sci-fi. You know, like how do these people just suddenly have all these amazing solutions and ideas? And just suddenly we have a solution. Can you imagine that? It's just suddenly.
Yeah.
To energy or to anything. Like, how is that possible? I reckon that a time travel or connecting to the quantum unified field, you know, drawing information out of that, maybe that's also a form of time travel, space travel.
For sure, for sure. There's some perspectives of all that I've come across. I see our higher selves or our soul basically as a time traveler, as in it's actually within future timeline. Right, a more evolved aspect of ourselves that's basically interacting with this current reality, all right, in order to guide, you know, through particular paths within time. So in a certain sense, from a particular perspective, we could say that we're all somehow time travelers in terms of our soul or our higher selves that are then kind of guiding us through this path. All right. So I do think I think time travel is a lot more common than we like to imagine. Right. In our minds, we think of a very sci-fi kind of thing. But I think it happens a lot. It just doesn't necessarily happen the way that we think it would. So time travel and space travel don't need to use the same mechanisms, right? But you can send information back through time or forward through time and these kinds of things and start these communication links. And I do think a lot of people are accessing these communication links either consciously or subconsciously, right? Where they get certain like downloads and then they start bringing that into their everyday experience, and they're actually opening up new timelines, new potentials by doing all of that. So,
yeah, and a lot of people actually claim, if you listen to any of these channelers, they do claim to be channeling people or versions of themselves from the future. Or,
yes, from the future.
Or other entities that exist in our very distant future. Yeah. Anyway, Tabs, we're going to have to wrap this up now. So I'd love to have another chat with you and just talk about all of that, the time travel and not just that, but your experiences, my experiences. You know, I said like profound things happened to me that I could say, yeah, this is why I believe in the things that I believe. You know, because I've had the most bizarre experiences, and I know that you have as well. So can we put a part 2 onto this? We'll put a part 2.
Definitely. I'd love that.
And then everybody can then, we'll do a follow-up on this. It'll be very exciting. But thank you so much for joining us today. All the links are going to be in our description below if people want to get hold of Tabs and do some fate work. And and enjoy that experience. It's fantastic. So to everybody, please like this, please share this, please stay well. And until the next time when we see you. Bye. Bye, Tabs. Bye.
Bye, Tanya. Thank you.